The steam was still rising from the bowl when it happened. I remember that detail because my mind does strange things when it's trying to protect me. It focuses on the small stuff, the curl of vapor, the faint smell of chicken broth and thyme, the way the kitchen light caught the edge of the porcelain right before it left my son's hand. Then heat. Searing, shocking heat running down my neck, soaking into my collar. Shards of the bowl, sharp and unforgiving, cutting into my lip. The metallic taste of blood mixing with salt. And Andrew's voice, low and cold, like he was disciplining a disobedient dog. Useless. If you weren't my mother, you'd be thrown out of this house already. I stood there, frozen, my hand halfway to my face, soup dripping from my chin onto the floor I'd mopped that morning. I didn't cry. I'd learned not to cry. Tears only made him angrier. Behind him, I heard Jasmine, his wife, my daughter-in-law, giggle. Not a nervous laugh. A pleased one. "You're such a real man," she cooed, sliding her arm around his waist. "You know how to teach the elderly the right way." The elderly. That's what I'd become to them. Not Margaret. Not Mom. Just the elderly. A burden. A servant. An obstacle. I wiped the blood from my mouth with the back of my hand and said nothing. What was there to say? I'd already said it all, in whispers, in pleading, in silence. And none of it had mattered. But something inside me, something I thought had died years ago, stirred. Maybe it was the taste of my own blood. Maybe it was the way Jasmine looked at me, like I was a piece of furniture she was planning to replace. Or maybe it was just that after 3 years of swallowing humiliation, my body had finally had enough. I looked at Andrew, really looked at him, and I didn't see my son anymore. I saw a stranger wearing my son's face. Let me take you back a little. Not too far. Just far enough so you understand how a woman like me ends up standing in her own kitchen, bleeding, while her son and his wife celebrate her pain. My name is Margaret Hill. I'm 73 years old. I'm a widow. My husband, Thomas, passed away almost 15 years ago. We had one child, Andrew, our pride, our future. For over 30 years, I worked as an executive secretary at Benton and Avery LLP, one of the most respected law firms in Chicago. I kept every contract organized, every meeting on schedule, every comma in its place. I was good at my job. People respected me. I respected myself. When I retired, I bought this house, a small 2-story place in the western suburbs with a front porch and a little garden where I planted roses. Thomas had always wanted roses. I kept them alive after he died. They bloomed every spring, red and defiant, like they were keeping a promise. This house was supposed to be my reward, my safe place, the spot where I could grow old in peace. Instead, it became my prison. The morning after the soup bowl incident, I woke up before dawn. My neck was still burning. My lip was split and swollen. Every time I moved my left shoulder, pain shot down my arm like lightning. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at myself. A stranger stared back. Gray hair, unwashed and flat. Dark circles carved deep under my eyes. A purple bruise spreading across my neck like a stain. I looked small, beaten, erased. I dabbed on some cheap foundation, the kind that doesn't really cover anything, but makes you feel like you're trying. Then I went downstairs. Andrew was already at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. He wore a red tie, the only thing about him that still reminded me of the boy who used to practice tying knots in front of the mirror before his first job interview. He didn't look up. "Where's breakfast?" he said flatly. "What would you like?" I asked. My voice came out softer than I wanted. "Scrambled eggs. Toast. Black coffee. Don't overcook the eggs." I nodded and turned to the stove. Behind me, I heard soft footsteps. Jasmine appeared in the doorway wearing a mint silk nightgown, her brown hair pulled into a high, neat ponytail. She smiled, the kind of smile you give a waiter, not a mother-in-law. "Good morning, Mother Hill," she said sweetly. "Morning," I replied. Her eyes flicked to the bruise on my neck, then to Andrew. A silent question passed between them, something smug and cruel. She tilted her head. "You should be more careful," she said lightly. "The kitchen floor is very slippery." I heard what she wasn't saying. "This is your fault. You deserved it. Don't you dare tell anyone otherwise." I said nothing. I poured coffee into Andrew's cup and set it gently in front of him. He didn't say thank you. He never did anymore. Instead, he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. "Remember, if anyone asks, you fell. And stop making random phone calls." My hands shook as I cracked the eggs into the pan. Jasmine laughed, a light, tinkling sound, and straightened his tie. "You really are the man of the house," she said teasingly. "Without you, this place would be chaos." Andrew put his hand on her waist and kissed her forehead. Then he looked at me and smiled. A cold, empty smile that made my stomach turn. When they finally left, car doors slamming, engine roaring down the driveway, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I stood at the sink, staring out the window at Ruth Delgado's house next door. Ruth was a kind woman, a widow like me, who sometimes brought over baked goods on weekends. She had soft gray curls and a warm smile that reminded me of what kindness used to feel like. I wanted to knock on her door, to tell her everything, but I was afraid. Afraid Andrew would find out. Afraid no one would believe me. Afraid I'd lose the last shred of dignity I had left. So instead, I washed the dishes. Slowly, methodically, keeping my mind as blank as I could. But then the phone rang. It was mid-morning. I was rinsing a glass when the landline, the old beige one mounted on the kitchen wall, started to trill. I almost didn't answer. Andrew didn't like me taking calls. But something made me pick up. "Hello. Good morning. This is Owen Price, an accountant at Northern Apex. I'm calling to confirm some recent transactions from an account under the name Margaret Hill." My heart stopped. My account? Yes, ma'am. There have been repeated transfers totaling nearly $180,000, all signed under your name. However, the signature appears inconsistent. The glass slipped from my hand. It didn't break, just clattered into the sink. I don't understand," I whispered. Owen Price's voice was calm, professional. "I'd like to discuss this with you in person if possible. Can you come to our office? 14th floor, Northern Apex, 212 North Avenue. The sooner, the better." I glanced toward the stairs. Andrew's bedroom door was still shut. I'll check," I said quietly. "Thank you, Mrs. Hill. We'll be waiting." When I hung up, my hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the counter. $180,000. My name. Forged signatures. And suddenly everything made sense. The way Andrew controlled every cent of my pension. The way he made me sign papers I didn't understand. The way he smiled when he told me he was investing for me. He'd been using me, not just as a servant, as a shield, a tool, a fall guy. And if I didn't do something, right now, today, he would destroy me completely. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Andrew's face, heard his voice, felt his hand on my wrist, squeezing until the bones ground together. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the bank. You're signing everything over." But I wasn't going to the bank. I was going somewhere else. At 5:30 in the morning, while the house was still dark and silent, I got up. I moved carefully, quietly, like a thief in my own home. I pulled on my old wool coat, the one with the frayed cuffs that I'd been meaning to replace for years, but never did. I slipped into my worn flats. I grabbed my purse and checked inside one more time. The black envelope, my ID, the house deed, and Ruth's note, folded small and tucked into the pocket of my coat like a talisman. "I believe you. I'm listening." I took one last look around the kitchen, the place where I'd cooked thousands of meals, where Thomas and I used to dance on Saturday mornings while the coffee brewed, where Andrew, as a little boy, had stood on a stool beside me, helping me stir pancake batter. This house held so many memories, but it had become a tomb, and I was done being buried alive. I slipped out the back door. The morning air was cold and sharp, biting at my cheeks. Frost glittered on the grass like shattered glass. Ruth's porch light was on. She'd left it on for me. I crossed the yard quickly, my breath puffing out in small clouds, and knocked softly on her back door. 3 times. The door opened immediately. Ruth stood there in her bathrobe, hair still in curlers, but her eyes were wide awake and alert. "Margaret," she whispered. "Are you ready?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She grabbed her coat and keys without another word. "Come on," she said. "I'm driving you." We drove through the empty streets in silence. The city was just beginning to wake. A few delivery trucks rumbled past. A man in a reflective vest swept the sidewalk outside a coffee shop. Streetlights blinked from red to green, guiding us forward. Ruth didn't ask where we were going. She already knew. I'd told her the night before, in a hushed, hurried conversation on her porch while Andrew was asleep upstairs. Northern Apex. 14th floor. Owen Price. The man who'd called about the forged signatures. The man who might be the only person willing to help me. When we pulled up in front of the Northern Apex building, I just sat there, staring up at the towering glass structure. It was huge, gleaming, intimidating. The kind of place where important people made important decisions. And here I was, a 73-year-old woman with a split lip and a black envelope full of secrets, about to walk in and accuse my own son of a crime. Ruth reached over and squeezed my hand. "You can do this," she said softly. "You are doing this." I looked at her, this woman who barely knew me, who owed me nothing, who could have turned away, closed her curtains, minded her own business. But she hadn't. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet," she said with a small smile. "Thank me when you're free." I stepped out of the car. The revolving door spun smoothly, swallowing me into the bright, sterile lobby. A young woman at the reception desk looked up, her smile polite but assessing. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Owen Price," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She tapped at her keyboard. "Your name?" "Margaret Hill." A pause, then a nod. "Yes, Mr. Price is expecting you. 14th floor. Elevators are to your right." I walked toward the elevators, my shoes squeaking faintly on the polished marble floor. Inside the elevator, I watched the numbers climb. 1, 3, 7, 10. Each floor felt like a step closer to something I couldn't take back. The doors opened. Owen Price was waiting for me. He was in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair, a trim build, and thin glasses that made him look both serious and kind. "Mrs. Hill," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." His grip was warm, steady. I shook it, and for some reason, that simple gesture, being treated with respect, made my eyes sting. "Thank you for calling me," I said quietly that he led me into a small conference room with glass walls and a long table. Through the windows, I could see the city spread out below, bathed in the soft gold of early morning light. Owen set a thick folder on the table and sat across from me. "I'll be direct," he said. "We've identified a pattern of suspicious transactions tied to an account under your name. Over the past 18 months, more than $180,000 has moved through that account. In and out, always quickly. The funds were transferred to accounts in Miami and Denver. Every transaction bears your signature." He slid a paper toward me. "But the handwriting doesn't match." I stared at the page. There it was. My name, Margaret Hill, written over and over in a hand that wasn't mine. Each signature slightly different. Shaky, rushed, forged. "Who did this?" I asked, though I already knew. Owen's expression was gentle but firm. "Your son, Andrew Hill." The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table. He used my name to launder money?" Owen nodded. "More precisely, he used your identity to legitimize embezzled funds from this company. We've collected sufficient evidence. But you need to understand something, Mrs. Hill." He leaned forward. "If law enforcement gets involved, and they will, you'll be the first person named. Your account, your name. Unless you file a report immediately, you could be charged as an accomplice." My hands started to shake. "But I didn't know," I whispered. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't transfer anything. I just lived in my house." "I believe you," Owen said. His voice was calm. "Sure, but the law doesn't work on belief. It works on evidence. And right now, all the evidence points to you." He slid another document across the table. "This is a sworn statement. If you sign it, you're officially declaring that you had no knowledge of these transactions and that your identity was used without your consent. It will protect you legally, and it will allow us to pursue Andrew." I stared at the paper. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold the pen. Owen spoke again, quieter this time. "I know this is hard. He's your son. But you can't save him by staying silent. Silence is just another way of admitting guilt on your behalf." I closed my eyes. In my mind, I heard Thomas's voice, a memory from years ago, when I was struggling with a difficult decision at work. "Margaret, when everyone turns away, the truth is the only thing that stands with you." I opened my eyes. "Give me the form," I said. Owen handed me the pen. I signed my name. Slowly, carefully. Margaret L. Hill. My real signature. The one that belonged to me. When I finished, I set the pen down and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Owen collected the papers and nodded. You did the right thing, Mrs. Hill. I looked up at him. What happens now? We forward this to the district attorney's office. They'll open an investigation. Andrew will be formally questioned. If the evidence holds, and it will, he'll be arrested. Arrested. That afternoon, Kimberly Hart called. She was an assistant district attorney, sharp, efficient, with a voice that cut through nonsense like a scalpel. Mrs. Hill, she said, I've reviewed the evidence Owen Price submitted, along with the video your neighbor provided. We have enough to move forward. I gripped the phone. Move forward with what? Charges. Elder abuse, coercion, financial fraud. If you're willing to testify, we can request an emergency arrest warrant. My heart stopped. Arrest? Yes. Within the next 48 hours, if you agree. I closed my eyes. An arrest. My son. In handcuffs. Because of me. Mrs. Hill. Kimberly's voice was gentle but firm. I know this is hard, but if we don't act now, he'll keep escalating. And next time, you might not walk away. I thought about the shove, the threats, the look in Andrew's eyes when he said, Don't blame me for what happens next. What do I need to do? I asked quietly. Come to my office. Sign the formal complaint. After that, we'll handle the rest. I hesitated. Then I thought of Ruth's words. You're not filing a complaint against your son. You're filing one against the man who hurt you. I'll be there tomorrow, I said. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every creak of the floorboards felt like Andrew coming for me. But the house stayed quiet. Too quiet. At 2 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and went downstairs. I made tea. I sat at the table. I stared at the black envelope, now thick with evidence. And I thought about the choice I was making. To testify against my own child. To stand in a courtroom and say, out loud, what he'd done to me. Part of me still wanted to protect him. To believe that somewhere buried deep, the boy I'd raised was still in there. But the truth was simpler. That boy was gone. And the man who'd replaced him was dangerous. The next morning, Ruth drove me to Kimberly Hart's office. It was in a red brick building downtown, modest and professional. Inside, the walls were lined with legal books and framed certificates. Kimberly met us at the door. She was in her early 40s, with sharp brown eyes and an upright posture that radiated confidence. Mrs. Hill, she said, shaking my hand. Thank you for coming. Ruth squeezed my shoulder. I'll wait out here. I nodded and followed Kimberly into her office. She sat across from me and opened a folder. I'm going to be direct, she said. The evidence we have is strong. The video, the bank records, Owen Price's testimony. But the most powerful piece will be your voice. She slid a document toward me. This is a formal complaint. By signing it, you're officially stating that Andrew Hill abused you physically, emotionally, and financially. You're requesting that the state pursue criminal charges. I stared at the paper. My hands were shaking again. What happens after I sign? I asked. We file it with the court. A judge reviews the evidence. If approved, and it will be a warrant is issued. Police will arrest Andrew within 24 to 48 hours. I swallowed hard. And then he's detained. There will be a bail hearing. Given the severity of the charges and the evidence of witness intimidation, I'll argue that bail should be denied. He'll be in jail. Yes. I looked down at the paper. At my name, printed neatly at the top. Margaret L. Hill, complainant. Kimberly leaned forward. Mrs. Hill, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen what happens when victims stay silent. They don't get better. They get hurt worse. Or they disappear. Her voice softened. You're doing the right thing. Not just for yourself. For every other person he might hurt. I picked up the pen. And I signed. 2 days later, the police arrested Andrew. I wasn't there when it happened. Kimberly had advised me to stay away, to let the law do its job. But Ruth was. She stood by her window and watched as 2 officers pulled up in front of my house, lights flashing. She watched as they knocked on the door. She watched as Andrew stepped out, confusion turning to rage, shouting something she couldn't quite hear. She watched as they cuffed him. And she watched as they put him in the back of the cruiser and drove away. When she called to tell me, her voice was steady. It's done, Margaret. He's gone. I sat on her couch, staring at nothing. Gone. My son was gone. And I was the one who'd sent him there. That night, I went back to my house. It felt different. Quieter. Emptier. But also lighter. like a weight I'd been carrying for 3 years had finally been lifted. I walked through the room slowly, touching things. The kitchen table, the windowsill, the roses outside, still blooming despite the cold. In the living room, I picked up the photo of Andrew as a boy. I looked at his smiling face for a long time. Then I set it down, face down, and I didn't cry. But Andrew wasn't done. 3 weeks after his arrest, while he was being held at Franklin County Jail awaiting trial, I received a letter, a yellow envelope, stamped with censored across the back. Slanted handwriting I'd know anywhere. Andrew's. I almost threw it away. But something made me open it. Inside were 2 pages, neatly folded. The handwriting was sharp, controlled, angry. Mother, I know you're enjoying your new role. The brave woman, the celebrated survivor. Everyone loves a victim, don't they? But don't forget, I have documents too. Remember Hanover versus State? 1998. That case where you edited a witness file under Richard Hale's direction? I have copies. The original note in your handwriting. Cut the witness section. Boss says it's unnecessary. If I send those to the court, your guardian of justice image will pop like a soap bubble. You'll be exposed, humiliated, maybe even charged. Drop the charges and everything stays quiet. This is your one chance. Andrew. The letter slipped from my hands. I felt the room tilt. Hanover versus State. That name. That case. The mistake I'd buried for over 20 years. The one I thought no one remembered. But Andrew had found it. And now he was going to use it to destroy me. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Hours. Eventually, Ruth knocked on the door. When I didn't answer, she let herself in with the spare key I'd given her. She found me at the kitchen table, staring at the letter. Margaret, she said softly. I couldn't speak. She picked up the letter and read it. Her face went pale. This is blackmail, she said. It's the truth, I whispered. Ruth sat down beside me. What happened in that case? I took a shaky breath. I was Richard Hale's secretary. He asked me to optimize some documents. Cut unnecessary sections. Clean up wording. I didn't think. I didn't realize. My voice broke. I didn't know I was helping him hide evidence. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Did you do it for money? For favors? No. I did it because my boss told me to. Because I trusted him. Then you're not guilty, Margaret. You were used. But I still did it. Ruth gripped my hand. And now Andrew is using that mistake to control you. Just like he's controlled you for 3 years. She looked me straight in the eye. The morning of the press conference, I woke before dawn. My stomach was in knots. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I must have changed clothes 3 times before finally settling on a simple navy dress. The one Thomas had always said made me look dignified. Dignified. I needed all the dignity I could find. Because in a few hours, I was going to stand in front of cameras and reporters and confess to a mistake I'd spent 27 years trying to forget. Ruth drove me to the Franklin County Prosecutor's office. The building was gray concrete and glass, imposing in the way government buildings always are. Out front, news vans were already parked, their satellite dishes pointed toward the sky like mechanical flowers. My chest tightened. I can't do this, I whispered. Ruth put the car in park and turned to me. Yes, you can. Ruth, they're going to tear me apart. They're going to call me a liar, a criminal. They're going to say I deserve everything Andrew did to me. Ruth reached over and gripped my hand hard. Margaret, listen to me. You are not going in there to beg for forgiveness. You are going in there to take back your power. Andrew thought this secret would destroy you. Instead, you're using it to bury him. I looked at her. Her eyes were fierce. Certain. You are Margaret Hill, she said. Executive secretary for 30 years. Survivor of 3 years of hell. And today, you are going to show the world what strength looks like. I took a shaky breath. And I nodded. Inside, Kimberly met us in a small conference room. She was dressed in a sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back, every inch the professional prosecutor. Ready? She asked. No, I said honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. She smiled. That's all courage ever is. She handed me a glass of water and a folder. Your statement is in here. Read it if you need to. But honestly, Margaret, I think it'll be more powerful if you just speak from the heart. I looked down at the folder. Inside was the statement I'd written. The confession. The truth. I closed it. I don't need it, I said quietly. I know what I have to say. The press conference was held in a small hall on the second floor. Rows of chairs faced a simple podium. Cameras lined the back wall, their lenses gleaming like black eyes. As I stepped into the room, a hush fell. I could feel every gaze on me. Judging, assessing, waiting. Kimberly walked to the podium first. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and authoritative. "Thank you all for coming. Today, Mrs. Margaret Hill will share her story. As a mother, as a survivor of abuse and financial exploitation, and as a citizen willing to face her past with honesty and courage." She gestured to me. "Mrs. Hill." I walked to the podium on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. The microphone was too high. I adjusted it with trembling hands. And then I looked out at the room, at the reporters with their notepads, at the cameras with their red recording lights, at Ruth, sitting in the front row, her eyes full of quiet faith. I took a breath, and I began. "My name is Margaret Hill," I said. "I'm 73 years old. I'm a widow, and for the past 3 years, I have lived in fear inside my own home." My voice was soft at first, shaky, but as I spoke, it grew steadier. My son, Andrew Hill, moved into my house 3 years ago after his divorce. I opened my door because that's what mothers do. We give. We forgive. We believe in second chances. I paused. But Andrew didn't want a second chance. He wanted control. I told them everything. About the pension he took over. The $200 a week he allowed me. The insults. The shoves. The slaps. About the night he threw the soup bowl in my face and told me I was useless. About the phone call from Owen Price that revealed Andrew had been using my name to launder nearly $200,000. The room was silent. Not a single camera clicked. Not a single pen scratched. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something shift. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was owning it. I stayed silent for 3 years. I continued, my voice stronger now. Because I was afraid. Afraid no one would believe me. Afraid I'd lose the last shred of dignity I had left. Afraid that if I spoke up, I would destroy the only family I had. I gripped the edges of the podium. But silence didn't protect me. It nearly killed me. I looked directly into the nearest camera. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it because silence never saves anyone. And because I want every person out there who's being hurt, by a child, a spouse, a caregiver, to know that speaking up is not betrayal. It's survival. A few people in the audience nodded. I saw a woman in the third row wipe her eyes. And I knew I was reaching someone. Then I took a breath. And I told them the rest. There's something else I need to say. 27 years ago, I made a mistake. The room seemed to lean forward. I was working as an executive secretary at Benton and Avery LLP. My supervisor asked me to edit documents for a case called Hanover versus State. He told me to cut unnecessary sections, to clean up the wording. My throat tightened, but I pushed through. I didn't realize at the time that what I was doing was wrong. I didn't understand the legal implications. I just trusted my boss and did what he asked. I looked down at my hands. I'm not telling you this to justify what I did. I'm telling you because my son tried to use it as blackmail. He threatened to expose me unless I dropped the charges against him. I lifted my head. So I'm exposing myself first. A murmur rippled through the room. I made a mistake. I take responsibility for it. But I will not let that mistake be used as a weapon to keep me silent. I will not let fear control me anymore. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. If I have to pay for what I did 27 years ago to be free from fear today, then so be it. Because freedom isn't free. And I'd rather face the consequences of my past than stay trapped in Andrew's prison. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping, slowly at first. Then more people joined in, until the entire room was applauding. Not loud, not exuberant, but sincere, respectful. The kind of applause that says, "We see you. We hear you. You matter." I blinked back tears and stepped away from the podium. Kimberly took my place. "Mrs. Hill's story demonstrates extraordinary courage," she said. "After reviewing the records from the Hanover case, our office confirms that she will not face criminal charges. Her actions were done under direction from a superior, without knowledge of wrongdoing, and without personal gain." She looked out at the reporters. "Our focus remains on prosecuting Andrew Hill for elder abuse, financial fraud, and extortion. Mrs. Hill is not a criminal. She is a survivor. and she deserves justice. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted in uneven patches across the yard. The roses, Thomas's roses, began to bud, their tight green knots slowly unfurling into deep red blooms. I stood on the porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the neighborhood, and realized something had changed. Not in the world. In me. For the first time in 3 years, I woke up without dread. Without listening for footsteps. Without bracing for insults or blows. I woke up free. The house felt different now. Bigger. Quieter. Mine again. I'd spent the weeks after the trial slowly reclaiming it. I repainted the living room. A warm cream instead of Jasmine's cold gray. I hung Thomas's photo back on the mantel. I replaced the curtains with soft yellow ones that let the morning light pour through. And I kept a few cracks in the walls. Not because I couldn't afford to fix them, but because they reminded me. Scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you survived. Ruth came over almost every morning. She'd knock on the back door. Never the front, always the back, the door that meant friend, not guest. And we'd sit on the porch with tea and pastries from the bakery on Maple Street. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat in comfortable silence, watching the world wake up. But one morning, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Are you still angry at him? I looked down at my cup. The steam rose in lazy spirals, disappearing into the cool air. I don't know if it's anger anymore, I said slowly. Maybe it's grief. Grief for the child I thought I raised. For the man I hoped he'd become. I paused. But angry? No. I'm just done. Done letting him take up space in my head. Ruth nodded. That's not indifference, Margaret. That's peace. But peace didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to live with what had happened. And using it for something good. That's when Kimberly called with an idea. Margaret, she said. I've been thinking. There are thousands of women like you. Older women being abused or financially exploited by family members. And most of them never speak up. I know, I said quietly. What if we created something to help them? A foundation. Legal support. Counseling. A hotline. We could call it the Hill Foundation, I finished. There was a pause. Then Kimberly's voice, warm and sure. Exactly. 6 months after the trial, the Hill Foundation officially launched. We held a small ceremony at the Franklin Community Center. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs and a podium and a banner Ruth had helped me make. But the room was full. Women of all ages. Some with walkers. Some with canes. Some with daughters or friends holding their hands. All of them carrying stories they'd never told. When I stood at the podium, I looked out at their faces and saw myself. Scared. Ashamed. Hoping someone would see them. I know why you're here, I said. Because someone hurt you. Someone you loved. Someone you trusted. And you've spent months, maybe years, wondering if it was your fault. A few women nodded. It wasn't, I said firmly. And you don't have to carry it alone anymore. I told them about the foundation, about the free legal consultations, the support groups, the emergency fund for women who needed to leave dangerous situations. We can't undo what happened to you, I said, but we can walk forward with you. And I promise, you will not walk alone. When I finished, the room stood and applauded. And this time I didn't cry. I just smiled. The foundation grew faster than I'd imagined. Within 3 months, we'd helped 27 women. Within 6 months, 54. Some just needed someone to listen. Others needed lawyers, safe housing, restraining orders. One woman, Carla, a soft-spoken grandmother with kind eyes, came in shaking so hard she could barely hold her teacup. Her son had been stealing her Social Security checks for 2 years. When she tried to stop him, he'd pushed her down the stairs. She sat across from me in the small office we'd rented on North Avenue and whispered. I thought I was the only one. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're not, I said. And you're not alone anymore. 6 weeks later, Carla's son was arrested. She sent me a card with a single pressed flower inside. Thank you for giving me my voice back. I kept it on my desk. A reminder that every woman who walked through our door was another life saved. Another chain broken. I also went back to work. Not to Benton and Avery. That chapter was closed. But to Northern Apex. Richard Hale had called me personally, his voice heavy with regret. Margaret, he'd said, I owe you an apology. For 1998. For not protecting you. For letting Andrew operate under my roof. I'd stayed silent, letting him sit with his guilt. I'd like to make amends, he continued. We're creating a position, ethics and compliance advisor. I want someone who understands how thin the line is between right and wrong. Someone who won't cross it. He paused. I want you. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, I'll do it. But on one condition. Anything. You fund the Hill Foundation. $50,000 a year. No strings attached. There was a pause. Then, done. So at 73 years old, I went back to work. Not as a secretary. As an advisor. I had a small office on the 14th floor. The same floor where I'd signed the complaint against Andrew. Every morning, I'd sit at my desk with a cup of mint tea and review financial reports, flagging anything that looked suspicious. Owen Price worked down the hall. We'd meet for lunch sometimes, comparing notes, double-checking signatures. You're good at this, he said one day. I smiled. I've had practice spotting lies. But the hardest part, the part I'd been avoiding, came one night in late autumn. I was at home making dinner when the phone rang. The caller ID read, Franklin Correctional Facility. My heart stopped. Andrew. I stared at the phone, my hand hovering over the receiver. I could let it ring. Ignore it. Pretend he didn't exist. But something in me, some small, stubborn part, needed to hear his voice one more time. I picked up. Mom. His voice was hoarse. Worn. Andrew, I said quietly. There was a long silence. Then, I don't want to live here. I'm scared. You have to help me. I closed my eyes. 3 years ago, those words would have broken me. Now they just made me tired. Help you how? I asked. Talk to the judge. Tell them I didn't mean it. Tell them I was under stress. Tell them. Andrew. I interrupted, my voice calm. I'm not going to lie for you. Silence. You hurt me, I continued. For 3 years you hurt me. And when I finally stood up for myself, you tried to destroy me. I was desperate. So was I said. And I didn't steal from you. I didn't hit you. I didn't use you as a shield for my crimes. I heard his breath catch. Justice isn't something you can manipulate, Andrew. It's something you face. Another silence. Then his voice breaking. I'm sorry, Mom. I sat down, gripping the phone. I know you are, I said softly. But sorry doesn't undo what you did. It doesn't give me back the years I lost. It doesn't erase the fear. So you'll never forgive me?